The infirmary of the starlit Meridian was built for survival, not comfort. Smooth alloy walls, white lights, quiet vents that breathed like a machine trying not to be heard. The air carried the clean bite of antiseptics and ion filters, so sterile that even the ship's scent sensors registered it as optimal. And then, on an ordinary shift, the monitors flagged an anomaly. A warm, drifting fragrance, soft, floral, faintly sweet, rolled through the corridor like a living thing. It tripped sensors on 2 decks, confused a ventilation algorithm, and made a pair of maintenance drones hesitate as if they'd forgotten their tasks. At the center of it all stood SAMIRA. She was hunched over a small human heating coil, watching the surface of a ceramic cup tremble as steam rose in slow spirals. She'd signed out the coil from her quarters. She'd also pulled a pouch of dried petals, chamomile, rationed and guarded like treasure, and a little squeezed tube of honey she'd been saving for the kind of day that requires it. Today, she decided, counted on the nearest cot lay a small Corin cub, no more than 6 cycles old. His thin plates looked dull, like someone had turned down the color on his world. His breathing hitched in tiny, uncomfortable pulls. The ship's diagnostic bed had already labeled it. Minor upper respiratory infection. Non-critical. Medication administered, which should have been the end. But the cub, Rook, kept making that sound. Not the sharp distress call that summoned security and medbots. Not the loud panic that lit warning panels. Just a small, exhausted whine that kept breaking. As if he didn't have the strength to be properly afraid. SAMIRA had heard that sound once before on Earth, in the middle of the night, coming from her little cousin's room. It was a sound that didn't belong in a place of steel and procedures. The attending physician, plated Dravari called healer shocks, had already done his part. The medication was correct. The dosage was correct. The chart was clean. He'd left with the calm certainty of someone who trusted systems. SAMIRA. She moved beside the cot. She moved beside the cot and lowered herself until her eyes were leveled with the cub's. Ryukei's pupils tracked her warily. Suspicion, fighting with fatigue. His translator chip clicked once, then smoothed his weak hiss into a child's voice. What is that smell? SAMIRA tilted the cup and blew gently across the surface. Tea, she said softly. Human tea. Rook blinked slow. Medicine, not exactly. She smiled in a way that felt ancient and familiar. When humans feel sick, sometimes we make something warm to help the hurting parts feel less alone. She tested the temperature against the inside of her wrist, an old habit the ship's crew had once joked about. Satisfied, she carefully offered the cup. Rook leaned forward. His tongue flickered once, tasting the air like a cautious scout. He made a skeptical little sound, an expression any human parent would recognize instantly as this better be worth it. Then he took a tiny sip. His eyes widened. It's warm, he breathed. Then another sip, a little bigger. It's sweet. It makes my throat feel soft. That's the point, SAMIRA said, relief loosening her shoulders. She pulled a blanket up over him, another unnecessary human object she'd smuggled into the infirmary months ago and refused to remove. Rook sipped again. And again within minutes his small body stopped trembling with effort. The tightness around his eyes eased. The miserable whine faded, replaced by a steady breathing pattern that made the monitor settle into content green lines. When his guardian returned, an anxious Corin deckhand whose hands shook as he checked the cot, he found Rook curled under the blanket with the empty cup clutched like a prize. His face slack with sleep. Safe. SAMIRA honestly believed that was the end of it. She was wrong. The next morning, she stepped into the infirmary and stopped dead. 3 soldiers waited outside, not patients, not injured crew, not anyone who belonged near diagnostic beds. These were Sarek fleet shock troops, towering, broad-shouldered, armored in natural plating, the kind of beings who treated plasma burns like an inconvenience and called broken ribs. Annoying, all 3 looked offensively. Healthy, the largest one took a step forward. His voice was a deep rumble that vibrated through the bulkhead. Medic. SAMIRA. She squinted. Yes, I have symptoms. SAMIRA stared. Symptoms of what? He lifted his chin with the seriousness of a courtroom oath. Throat discomfort. Mild fatigue. Possible respiratory distress. The second soldier nodded, slow and solemn. I also have these symptoms. Very concerning. The third added, without blinking. Same SAMIRA folded her arms. Uh-huh, a small silence stretched. She leaned closer and lowered her voice. And this has nothing to do with the fact that Rook told half the ship about the human warmth. Cup that makes your throat feel soft. The first soldier's crest flickered. An involuntary color shift that, on his species, translated roughly to embarrassment. We are legitimately concerned for operational readiness. SAMIRA exhaled through her nose. Sure you are. By noon, the line had multiplied. It ran past the infirmary door, down the corridor, and around the bend toward the lift. Sarek Korin, 2 VAC engineers who rarely spoke to anyone. Even a Zentari pilot famous for ignoring injuries until they became disasters, stood there with his arms folded, practicing a cough that sounded like a poorly tuned engine, one by one. They delivered their claims. A strange dryness, a heaviness in the lungs, a sorrow in the throat, a mysterious weakness that only appears when I smell that fragrance. The symptoms grew more poetic as the rumor grew legs. SAMIRA recognized faces from tactical briefings. Warriors who'd stared down boarding parties and held the line, without flinching. Now they were sniffing dramatically and blinking too, hard like children trying to fake tears. She should have been furious instead. She found herself dragging a larger heating unit from storage and setting up a second cup line. Like she was running a tiny cafe in the middle of a warship, the ship's gossip network ignited. Heard it cures battle fatigue, whispered one crew member to another. My cousin said it gives clarity, insisted a mechanic. A pilot told me it made him dream of sunlight, someone said with reverence. A young Sarek recruit leaned toward SAMIRA and whispered, deadly serious, I heard it makes you feel forgiven. SAMIRA nearly laughed. By the third day, the doorway darkened as a figure filled it. Commander Vareth, captain of the starlit Meridian, stood framed by the infirmary lights, tall, armored, ceremonial plating polished to a mirror shine. His expression was carefully neutral in the way only commanders could manage. Like emotion was a liability he'd trained out of his body. The line fell silent. SAMIRA set down her ladle and lifted her eyebrows. Let me guess. Vareth's gaze flicked to the cups, the steam, the waiting crew. Then back to her. I have received reports, he began, voice steady, of a human preparation with notable morale effects. SAMIRA smirked. Symptoms. A ripple moved across his facial plating. His species' version of a private wince. As captain, it is my duty to investigate anything affecting performance and cohesion. With respect, Captain, SAMIRA said, it's tea. Nevertheless, he replied, and stepped forward, for the first time since she'd met him. She saw something new in his eyes, curiosity. SAMIRA sighed like someone surrendering to an inevitability. Fine, sit. She poured him a cup. Black tea this time, stronger, with a faint citrus note that reminded her of mornings on Earth. He took it carefully, claws awkward around ceramic, like he was holding something fragile and didn't trust himself not to break it. He studied the steam. Why does this ritual exist among humans, he asked. Our databases show minimal pharmacological advantage beyond hydration. SAMIRA leaned against the counter. It isn't about the chemistry, Varath looked up. It's about the message, she said softly. You don't have to suffer by yourself. Someone saw you. Someone stopped what they were doing. Someone made time to bring warmth to where you hurt. The captain took a sip, his eyes closed. When they opened again, the sharp edges of his face seemed less sharp. I understand, he said quietly. Why humans volunteer first for mercy operations. Why your people treat injured enemies. Why your ships carry extra blankets. He finished the cup without speaking. Then he placed it down with a gentleness that didn't match his armor. Medik SAMIRA, he said formally. I am authorizing immediate requisition of whatever supplies you require for this preparation. Consider it an approved supplement to standard protocols. SAMIRA blinked, then smiled. Aye, Captain. Within a week, 3 crew members had been trained in the art of brewing. The infirmary side room gained an unofficial name, the Comfort Station. Human herbs became the fleet's most carefully tracked commodity, and Rook, fully recovered, became a tiny celebrity, telling anyone who would listen about the human who made warmth in a cup, each retelling. Grew bigger, soon the story wasn't tea. It was human healing. It was the comfort ritual. It was the warmth that defeats the cold. SAMIRA didn't correct them. She just kept brewing, 1 cup at a time, teaching an entire fleet. Something the databases couldn't measure, and the machines couldn't. Dispense, sometimes the best medicine wasn't a formula, sometimes it was care. Sometimes it was warmth, and sometimes it took an entire fleet faking symptoms, just to learn how badly they needed it. Asterisk if you enjoyed this story. Hit subscribe to Neon Cub Tales for more HFY sci-fi short stories every week. Like the video, drop a comment, and tell me which moment made you smile the most. Share this with a friend who loves alien cub stories. Thanks for watching, and welcome to the crew.